get started, welcome everyone to the Planning Commission meeting of March 11th, 2020. The first item on our agenda is the approval of the minutes for February 26, 2020.
I'll move we approve the minutes from the last meeting.
I'll second that.
A motion from Maureen and a second from Sarah. Let's run down. John?
Yes.
Maureen?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Brenda?
Yes.
Carolyn?
Agree.
Andreas?
I abstain.
Matt is not here. And Sarah?
Yes.
Okay, motion passes. Okay, next we've got the report of the chair and the vice chair. I have nothing to report. Do you have?
I have
Okay.
nothing to report.
Okay, and we've got the report of the director,
So I have a lot of things to talk about tonight.
and we're very excited about all of them.
The first thing, more in regards to the business of the Planning Commission, I just wanted to give you guys an idea of what we have coming up. We right now have 77 applications that are pending Planning Commission approval sitting in our office. Those applications are up 168% this calendar year. So just wanted to give you guys a heads up that right now, applications that get submitted to the city now are not going to be before you until August or September at the schedule that we're going with. So it's going to be a fairly hectic period of time. One of the reasons why I bring that up is that we also have the potential to have pretty serious disruptions of public meetings in the city with everything that's going on with COVID-19 and all that fun stuff. So I wanted to give you guys an update on what the city's doing for that and to prepare for that. I do think that we're pretty far ahead of the curve on this. So we are currently working on setting up systems where we can have different types of public meetings and public hearings. There's some laws that are in place that basically state the majority of the body has to be in the same place, a quorum. So we're figuring out rules and procedures to deal with that in case we end up having a more widespread issue in the city with it. So we do anticipate that there will be some changes that you will experience at the public hearings and meetings. We know that internally we are going to be having a number of changes that start going into effect as soon as tomorrow. Most of those just deal with our day-to-day business. So we know there's going to be some trial and error. We're going to try to do the best we can to figure those out and to keep operations moving as smoothly as we possibly can. But in the meantime, there are some things that we can do during these meetings. First off, if any of the commissioners are uncomfortable being in a public setting, let us know and we'll figure it out. If we have a quorum, that's great. If we don't, we'll do what we can to try to find a solution. One thing that happens a lot at these meetings, at the end of the meeting, is that there's all kinds of debris left in the room, napkins, used cups. If you have a cup and you have a napkin, it's your job to throw it away. It's not ours. And so make sure that you are doing that. We will shame you if you don't. So we'll find a way to do that appropriately, but it'll happen. One thing you'll notice is that we've removed a third of all the chairs in this room to create more separation between people so that there's less risk. We've also, just prior to this meeting, we've disinfected the entire room. We'll be doing that before and after every public meeting that's held in this room. There's also hand sanitizer, both at the public comment table and as you enter the room. So please use it. We've also eliminated the note cards, and this is important for the public because that's how we used to put in order of how people speak. So we are going to be kind of winging it a little bit tonight until we can figure out a more standard protocol. But as we open public hearings, we will ask if anybody, by show of hands, who wants to speak, and then we'll probably use the front row to organize speakers, so you can come up, sit there, and then we'll leave it up to the chair to start left to right, right to left, or whatever, and we will go from there. Because we try to respect and get everybody's names right, if you have a name that may be difficult to hear on a recording, please feel free to spell it. We won't start our time until we know who is at the table, but it is a requirement that we know who is speaking. So state your name at the beginning, and we will do the best we can. And I think one other thing that we are going to be looking at internally is how we deal with public meetings and public engagement and everything else. So we have a very short time frame. By the middle of next week, we have to come up with alternative plans to going to community meetings and hosting those meetings and things like that. So it's going to get wild and crazy for us a little bit, but just want to let sure everybody know. And why that's important is because, and I'm speaking for the planning division at this point in time, but we don't believe that attending a public meeting means that your comment is worth more than if you submit it in writing or you submit it via phone call or any other means. They are just as important to us. Now, they're used differently depending on the type of application that's before everybody, but we want to make sure that that message is loud and clear. So we may be changing how we present some of the comments that we've already heard so that they're more prevalent, particularly the issues identified, so that you guys are aware of those things. And so that we maintain a certain level of access to the public and equity in how we do our business. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer those, but if not, that's all I have.
Any questions for Nick? I guess one thing with the public comments, we could have them that they're read aloud at the hearing if someone does not want to attend but wants the comments made public for the larger
Yes,
public.
certainly.
So that's something I guess we can think about. Well, thank you for that very uplifting and inspiring report, Nick. Okay, we will now move on to the public hearing portion of the agenda. And as Nick said, we typically have cards for members of the public to fill out, and then they would be delivered to us, and that's how we organize the speakers. So what we will do before each agenda item, when we get to the point of opening the public hearing, I'll just ask by a show of hands if you'd like to speak, and then we will just ask you to sit closer to the front, and we'll just go down the line. If everyone has 2 minutes to speak on the topic, we give community council representatives 5 minutes, and we ask them to come first. And otherwise, we'll just try to move through this and keep it as orderly as we can. So, first item on the agenda, number 1, ADU, conditional use at approximately 1695 South Wasatch Drive. Case number PLN PCM 2020-00012, and we have Chrissy.
Hi. Great, good evening. So this is a conditional use request for a detached accessory dwelling unit at a property located approximately 1695 South Wasatch Drive. The property is zoned R1 12,000 single-family residential, which requires conditional use approval. You can see from the photographs on the screen, this is the primary residence, and then it is surrounded by R1 12,000 and then R1 7,000 to the west, so surrounded by primarily single-family structures. The proposal is the detached accessory dwelling unit. It's proposed to be located in the northeast corner of the rear yard. It is also surrounded by a 6-foot vinyl fence, so it's not see-through. The building footprint is approximately 432 square feet, and it's a 1-story structure that measures approximately 11 feet 3 inches. The entrance of the ADU faces the south lot line, and there is a window that faces the rear facade of the single-family dwelling. The parking is located, as you can see, the yellow box on the site plan is located in the driveway, and tandem parking is allowed through the ADU ordinance. So just looking at some site context photos. So this top photo on the left is the approximate location of the accessory dwelling unit in the rear yard, looking towards the rear of the single-family dwelling. And then this top right image shows the driveway where the proposed tandem parking would be for the unit. And then you have a photo just of the other side of the house and a photo of the street that shows that there is parking on street, but they are proposing the parking to be located on the driveway. As far as public comments go, the East Bench Community Council requested that staff and the applicant present at their February meeting. At the meeting, the Community Council and members of the public expressed concerns with ADUs in general, that they're really specifically that the increased density of their neighborhood. And then with this specific ADU, they had concerns about parking. The original site plans for this project showed parking on the street, and the Community Council requested that it be moved to the on-site on the property. The applicant did comply with that request and moved the parking to the driveway. So that's why you don't see it as a condition of approval, because it's on the site plan, which they are bound by. Additionally, following the meeting, staff received notice that the primary residence is currently being used as an Airbnb, so it's now under enforcement for that. Moving forward, they do have to comply with our registration requirements, where the owner has to live in one of the two units. They can either live in the ADU or the maid residence, but they can't rent both out. And then Airbnbs are not allowed in residential zones, so they do need to come into compliance for that as well. Moving forward, if the ADU is approved, if they don't follow those registration requirements, their conditional use can be revoked. So it really does come down to enforcement and paying attention. But if they don't follow those registration requirements, such as a deed restriction that says that one of the units has to be owner occupied, their conditional use could be revoked. So in conclusion, based on the findings in your staff report, planning staff does recommend approval. We believe that it meets all of the standards of approval listed in attachments E and attachments F. And that concludes my presentation.
Thanks, Chrissy. Any questions for Chrissy at this point?
Yes, Chrissy, so there being an Airbnb there now, does that keep us from approving the zoning?
No, it's two separate issues. They would have to come under compliance as far as that they couldn't be renting. They would have to live, the owner would have to live on site, but it doesn't impact this approval.
So if we find that all the conditions are met, the zoning will probably need to be approved, is that correct?
If you believe that the detrimental impacts can't be mitigated.
All right, thank you very much.
Can't be mitigated, I mean.
So what would be the process if they were to go back to the Airbnb after this, and after they got the approvals? If we revoked, what happens then? Do they have to tear it down, or is it just abandoned?
So that would depend on the level of enforcement that it gets to, but basically the city would have to enforce on the use of the Airbnb, which isn't allowed in the zone. Short-term rentals aren't allowed in the residential zones. The options that are available to the city could be revoking the conditional use for the ADU, in which case they could not use it. And I don't know that we
require
could force them to
removal?
remove the building, but in past enforcement cases, there have been situations where people have had to remove
Remove them.
structures. So
That's all for me.
Any other questions? Okay, is the applicant here? Okay.
Greetings to the council. Thank you guys for your time tonight. I
Make
think
sure to state your name for the record
Ian
for us.
Kaplan.
Andrea Palmer.
Thank you.
I think the first thing we want to address is the Airbnb, because I think that's the primary importance on this one. So the owner is renting a room using Airbnb, but he only rents it at a minimum of 30 days. So it's not technically a short-term rental. It's actually more of a longer-term rental. So he has several residents that have stayed with him for 2, 3, 5-month periods. So in terms of a short-term rental, it actually is not a short-term rental the way that he rents it. And if you go on Airbnb and look at his listing, you'll see that it's a minimum day of 30. So we've kind of handled that. And we have supporting evidence as well, if you guys want to look at it in terms of, the people that have rented from him and previous bookings. And
So does he live on site?
yes, yes.
Oh, okay.
So he lives in the main bedroom, and then he rents an additional bedroom using Airbnb. And again, not short-term, it's more of a long-term rental. So are there any other questions revolving or clarifying the use of the Airbnb?
Anybody have any other questions for the applicant? No? Okay,
Yeah,
Great.
thank you.
thank you. Okay, we will now move on to the public hearing. I will go ahead and open the public hearing, and can I see a show of hands of who would like to speak? Okay, Just a few. Is there anyone here from the community council? Okay, I'll ask the community council reps to come first. Yes, please, and then that's, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Just make sure to state your name for the record into the microphone, and you'll have 5 minutes.
My name is Amy Burrows, AIMEE BURROWS, and I'm the chair of the East Bench Community Council. Like I said, this is our first conditional use request since the ADU rule is new, and you may or may not know that our neighborhood and our community council has not embraced the ADU law. We tried to get, get it phased into our neighborhood and that kind of stuff. So when we had our meeting in February 19th, there were a lot of comments about we just don't want ADUs. It just doesn't match the character of our neighborhood. There were concerns about enforcement, a lot of concerns about enforcement because enforcement is tough. We hear lots of horror stories about things that don't get fixed through code enforcement. And my understanding of there was a lot of concern at that meeting as well, not just in general, but in specific to this property. How many renters can stay in the main house and how many renters can stay in the ADU? And my understanding is that 3 unrelated people, that's the maximum number of people that can rent in a residential area. Does that include the 1 or 2? I mean, it's a small ADU. I don't know the answer. If somebody can tell me the answer to that, I don't know what it is. And my understanding as well that when code enforcement made their investigation of this home, that they found that there were 3 rooms being rented in this home, potentially to 1 or 2. If you looked it up on Airbnb last week, I was able to reserve a room in this home for 7 days, not for 30. So he's recently changed, since his code enforcement has come around, he's recently changed the listing to put it at 30 days, which would be in compliance, but that's not always been the rule. And he only changed it last week. And there are several kind of reviews that said when I stayed there for 3 days, it was great. Or my 1 week stay there was very comfortable. There are several reviews that say, we had a wonderful time here, which indicates it's renting to more than 1 person at a time. So there is a short-term stay, and that's part of the problem with this ADU. It's a person who's already kind of not following the rules about who can rent this space in this type of a neighborhood, and there will just be additional space for that. So there was specific concern about that. We didn't know about the rental of the property until a neighbor told us later that people are speeding around, and he's renting space in that home. So there's an actual specific argument against this property being allowed. And if the only changes that he's made in the last week is to change it so that now you have to rent for 30 days instead of 7 days like it was last week, that's a simple change to make after it gets off of your desk. And I wonder if maybe this guy needs to spend 3 months renting appropriately and following the rules for short-term rentals for this kind of neighborhood. So like I said, this is our first time, this is our first ADU request, and the vote went the way it did, where 22 of our members at the meeting said not to approve the conditional use request, and 15 said to do it with the condition of parking, and 1 said not to. I think those numbers would have been significantly different if we'd known that there were already renters on this property. But that's the way it is, and maybe it's in the hands of code enforcement right now, but we are nervous adding more space to this property that hasn't been following the rules for renting.
My name is Brooke Carrington. I also serve on the East Bench Community Council. Amy is our chair, and I'm one of the vice chairs. We also understand this Airbnb listing at some point required the tenants, the renters, to park on the streets. And I do have a little bit of a gripe about the photos that have been presented. They make it look like there's plenty of space and plenty of parking. There is plenty of space and plenty of parking, but it's usually full. And along this stretch particularly, I don't have a particular problem with this person who owns the house, but I live a block away, and it is always full, especially in the summer. I believe that they have some sort of a pool or something in the back. So it's a very, very busy household. And so I don't think that we can just assume that there's going to be plenty of parking. It is a large driveway, but the Airbnb listing did require that the tenants, the renters, do park on the street, and that has recently been changed as well. That's it.
Great, thank you very much. Okay. Zach, did you want to come speak? No? Are there others here who want to speak on this? You might, okay. Sir, would you like to come forward? Please make sure to state your name for the record, and you'll have 2 minutes.
Hi, my name is Stuart Louie. I'm actually the owner of that residence. And let me tell you exactly what's going on there. Yes, I do have renters there, and they are on a 30-day. I'm not going to say that I haven't in the past. Every tenant I have, probably within the last 6 months, have been a 30-day rental. And I don't do short-term rentals anymore because it's not worth it to me. As far as the parking goes, I have ample parking up at the top. Yes, I do have a pool in the back. The reason why I'm putting this unit in is because I generally have relatives that come stay with me. And as an added income source, I do rent it out. And I was originally planning a pool house back there. But what this is, it gives me a turnkey option. So I actually went with this sort of ADU. And what they're talking about, I've never had a problem with neighbors talking about people I've had rent from me, parking, or any other disturbance. So these problems that they're bringing up are really unfounded. I don't see, if you go on Airbnb, you can see I'm a super host. I do everything by the books. I was kind of unaware of the fact that you couldn't rent for less than 30 days. I am in compliance with that, so essentially, I'm following everything by the rules. You can have as many as 3 people stay with you in any one residence. I have not exceeded that, and again, the only reason I'm doing this is so I can have space again for my relatives that come stay with me. So that's kind of the whole background of why I'm putting this unit in. And it's so private back there, you can't even tell that anybody's back there. My lot in particular is probably unique in the sense that it is very big. It's a 0.55 acre lot, and it's surrounded by fencing. And if you were to look from the street, you wouldn't even know that a unit was back there. We're talking about a 432 square foot structure. It is not a big structure. I've seen larger structures than that can be accommodated back there. But I'm just going with number one, to accommodate relatives coming in to stay with me. And if I can't do that, yes, obviously I may rent it out for if I have a vacancy. But as far as parking is not an issue. I have other ways to put parking in as far as even pouring another pad on my property. So I really don't think that what they're talking about is affecting the neighborhood at all as far as what I'm doing there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here? Zach, looks like you're up.
Zachary Dussault, speaking in favor of this project. It seems like our number one issue with ADUs has been addressed in this project, which is on-street parking. The applicant provided an off-street space as a compromise to the community council. And as always with these, I'd just like to present my alternative transportation plan for this property. The property is a 5-minute walk from a bus stop that is serviced 30 minutes on peak, an hour off peak. The property is actually it's a 10-minute bike ride to the U, so that would be convenient for someone who worked at the U. And I don't really need to go into the benefits of ADUs. I'm sure you guys are all aware of the increase in housing supply, aligns with the city goals to increase density, increase housing supply, and address the upcoming affordable housing crisis in the city. And that's it. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Is there anyone else here who'd like to speak on this agenda item? Okay, seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Bring it back to the commission? Do we want staff back? Do we want Chrissy back?
I would like an answer to the applicant, to the question about the renters and how many people and all of that.
And
Yeah.
Nick, can you clarify that
So,
for us?
so the definition of family in the zoning code allows up to 3 unrelated people to live within a single unit. So that would be in the principal home and in the ADU, although the 400 and something,
Would include, sorry.
It-
Would include the ADU.
they're 2 separate
Separate,
dwelling units.
because they're
So
two.
it would apply,
It's,
yeah.
so you could have 3 in one and 3 in another.
you could in conceivably, but a 432 square foot,
Right, 3 unrelated
rough,
people there
but-
would be,
potentially the ordinance would allow that.
Okay.
okay. And the 3 unrelated people, one of them has to be the owner if it's an ADU, correct?
So that one of the requirements for an ADU is that the owner lives on the property either the ADU or in the principal dwelling.
All right, any other questions for Nick or Chrissy or anyone? Would anyone like to entertain a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Sarah.
Based on the information, the staff report, the information presented, and the input received during the public hearing, I move that the Planning Commission approve petition PLN PCM 2020-00012 with the following conditions. The applicant shall comply with the registration process outlined in section 21A. Point 40.200.f of the Salt Lake City zoning ordinance.
Okay, we have a motion by Sarah.
I'll second. Excuse me, I'll second.
Second by Maureen. Any discussion?
Yeah, I think it is sort of not in our wheelhouse to be the enforcers on the ADU, the question of how many people and what kind of people are living here. That is an enforcement issue that belongs with the building department. Is that correct? And I would urge the neighborhood actually to be a little vigilant, because that is how enforcement actually kind of works. So if there's a continuation or something goes back on the Airbnb, as one of the community council members was saying, and changes it, then that's another condition where the building department should be notified. But in terms of the planning commission, I think it's important to realize that we are looking at a conditional use, and if there is no negative impact to the conditional use, or if the positive impacts outweigh the negative, then we're really required to approve the application.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate that comment. So when I did the community council, I remember it took me probably years to figure that out, because nobody ever relayed that information to us, in that a conditional use state law requires that we approve it. Our role here is to identify negative impacts and then mitigate them. So the negative impact you identified was parking. Seems to be mitigated by putting it off-site, and then we're required to do it. So all those other comments, while very appropriate and understandable, fall way outside of our purview. So when we look at conditional uses, we're really looking at how is there something about this ADU that has a detrimental impact, and how do I positively mitigate that, because I'm basically forced by state law to push it through. And I just want to relay that to the community council members so that it becomes part of your education as not only ADUs move forward, but other conditional uses come before you in the future, so you understand kind of how we're hampered and what our role is in that process.
Great. Okay. Let's do the roll call. Sarah?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
Andreas?
I also would like to commend the the community council members that came, and please keep vigilant, just like your comments were said, so yes.
Carolyn,
Agree.
Brenda,
Yes.
Amy,
Yes.
Maureen,
Yes.
John.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes. Thank you. Thank you all for coming, and thank you for providing your input. Next item on the agenda, number 2, rezone and master plan amendment at approximately 771 and 795 North 400 West. These are 2 case numbers. Case number PLN PCM 2019-01011 and PLN PCM 2019-01095. And we have David.
Okay, good evening. As you noted the application numbers, this is a zoning map amendment and a master plan request, and this would be a change from the M1 light industrial zone to the MU mixed use zone on 2 parcels located 771, 775 north. I have a map up that shows those parcels. The more northern parcel is 0.8 acres in size, or about 36,000 square feet. It has existing office buildings and development on it. The smaller parcel is 0.42 acres, or 18,000 square feet. It is vacant. It's never been developed. So the applicant has requested to rezone those, and the idea, at least presented, was that the southern parcel would be developed for multifamily housing. No current development plan has been submitted with this application. The property does lie in an industrial area on the west side of 400 West. I'll back up to the zoning map. It's in the Capitol Hill Master Plan area, and 400 effectively acts as the dividing line between mixed uses more to the east and then the industrial zoning on the west side of 400 West. The applicant's request, again, both zones would allow commercial uses, but the M1 zoning that's currently on the property doesn't allow residential uses. Mixed-use zoning would allow some residential uses, but it would not allow the industrial manufacturing uses. In the mixed-use zoning, there is more lot and bulk controls to look at that street frontage. So staff looked at a number of things in the master plan. Within the context of the Capitol Hill Master Plan, the properties don't fit discretely into a neighborhood. They're north of what's described as south of the Guadalupe neighborhood is to the south, so it's north of the Guadalupe neighborhood and to the west of the Capitol Hill neighborhood. So it's not discretely in any, it's more or less described as kind of the industrial areas of Capitol Hill. And so, again, in the master plan, there's some contradictions. There's a discussion of transition of some of those industrial areas into more commercial and mixed-use areas, but the zoning map, the future land use map doesn't reflect those changes. So we looked at a number of things, including kind of the anticipated future changes to the area, that this may be an area that transitions over time, and that having at least those mixed uses along 400 West would provide some transition between the more residential and mixed-use areas to the east and the heavier industrial areas to the west. The change can be supported by both city and neighborhood master plans. And again, we also looked at that zoning and compatibility with adjacent properties. One of the concerns, again, would be, usually in a rezone, you're looking at how does a change impact the neighbors. In some ways, we're looking at, okay, how do those surrounding uses potentially impact new development on this property? And we looked also at what other alternative zoning districts we could look at, CG, general commercial, but again, those are aimed, though the design standards are aimed more at commercial uses, not so much creating an attractive residential setting. So we are recommending that the Planning Commission forward a positive recommendation to City Council for both the zoning map and master plan amendments.
Thanks, David.
I have a
couple of questions. So on the zoning map that you have in here, so this master plan was last updated in 2001.
Correct.
And I guess I feel like I've been seeing a lot of future land use maps that don't seem to express a vision. They just seem to reflect the conditions when the master plan was done, and they're not really looking forward. So the fact that there seems to be some incongruence with the future land use map doesn't really bother me. But when the current zoning that's on here, seems to be these really strange little pockets of an RMF 35, block away, and the CG, half a block away on the corner. I guess I just wonder, like, are we I don't want to continue this weird pattern where we get these funky little pockets of what then end up feeling to be misplaced, but rezones for some very specific thing, and then it just becomes something that we continue to, like, oh, this is where it is, so this is going to be on the future land use map again, and we're still not expressing a vision of how we want this area to be, or the community isn't expressing that. So I guess, can you kind of just address your thoughts on, with this very clear divide that we have between the MU and the M1, what you see or what you feel that MU would then spread in this particular block, or is it still going to just end up being another one of these little pocket things that are going on?
I think over time we would hope it would spread, because when you get down to more like 400 north, you get into the TSA zoning. So I think there is a logic to having it, at least on the street frontage, be mixed use.
Yeah, I think that's correct. And also, one of the things that has happened for decades in Salt Lake is that just like you mentioned, we've planned and zoned to match the existing conditions, and we never really had what's in the future. About 10 years ago, we started redoing our plans as we had resources to do them. The Capitol Hill plan is one of our, I think it's third oldest plan now, third or fourth. But we did make a major update to it south of this property along the 400 West corridor in 2011. But yeah, you're right in that, unfortunately, we're dealt the hand we've been dealt for decades, and we're trying to systematically actually have not just our master plans reflect future growth needs for the city, particularly when it comes to housing, but also have our zoning support that, and we don't really have that. One of the things that we're starting to seriously look at as a city is these M1 zones that are closer to town really need to transition to something else. There's no need for having industrial uses this close to our downtown anymore, and this certainly is going to be one of those areas that hopefully over the next few years we look at more comprehensively.
So one of the things that's happening along 4th West and 3rd West is a series of breweries. Would a brewery be allowed in the mixed-use zone?
Yes, mixed-use zone does allow a brew pub under 2,500 square feet and a tavern and some other uses as a conditional use.
Can they actually brew beer there? That's an industrial use, right? Quasi-industrial.
So they can't be a brewery only. They can brew it as part of a brewery. In some of the zones to the south, you can do breweries in addition to, and so those are some of the things that we would look at. What are those compatible uses? One of the concerns that we have with breweries is the sheer amount of water they use.
Yes.
And so how much of that do we really want to be happening? If we only have X amount of water, what is the most important thing to send it to, or what are the most important uses that should be using that? So.
Well, I vote for beer. I mean, just to put that
When
on
in
the
doubt.
record.
Okay. All right, any other questions for David or Nick at this point? Is the applicant here? Great.
Give me a moment to change it. I got this via email while we were out on the field trip, so.
I'm Derek Christensen. I represent Design West for this change, and very appreciative to be here, so thank you for having us. I sent this a little late to David, so I apologize.
Sorry, I think the mouse is dead.
Let's try that one.
The mouse is still dead. You have
I promise it'll be short, so.
Oh, no, he doesn't. He's using the, he's using the.
Yeah, I'm showing my Mac ignorance trying to find where this is.
Seriously.
All right.
And just hit present there and we'll.
Slideshow.
Like that.
Okay. Anyways, we'll go from there.
Let's see.
Okay, I will. How do you hit slideshow on that?
There we go.
There we go, thank you.
Okay, well, just, quick introduction to us. So we've been a member of this community for quite some time. We've been community members here in Utah for since 1892. So we kind of find ourselves here in this community. This is our home away from home. I'm here from 6 a.m. till almost 10 p.m. on occasion. So we very much support this community. We look at this change as something that brings more beauty to what we would like to do in that area. I wanted to talk a little bit towards that vision of the master plan. It is kind of very, very much hidden within the master plan, but I wanted to bring out a few of those things. We've already seen a map of where we're at. We are currently a light industrial use in that space. The master plan does have some very unique language for this specific area that we thought we'd kind of bring to the benefit of this discussion. Specifically, and I'm sorry if we can't read that. So we're talking about this area here at North Temple, an area located between North Temple and 900 North, which we lie within 400 West and 550 West. Specifically, the future of this area, it talks about this once was railroad property. It became, and it says becomes available for redevelopment. Adjacent properties with existing industrial land uses should transition to less intensive uses, which would be what we would certainly propose. It continues saying the rail yard would provide an easy opportunity for redevelopment. This area, along with existing structures, is seen as as a mixed-use area in the future, combining mid-sized structures containing residential and commercial office uses. Lastly, it does give a little bit of a policy encouragement. It says encourage the relocation of the existing industrial heavy commercial land use to industrially zoned land in other appropriate areas of the city by rezoning the existing properties to a zone classification, which would allow a mix of less intensive land uses by analyzing the feasibility of existing, if I can only read, I apologize, of establishing a redevelopment project area and by using city resources to encourage the mixed-use development in the residential and office commercial uses. And that's exactly what we are. I mean, we have every intent to still utilize the property to the north, acting as that buffer between the heavier industrial that may continue to be there for years to come. Our hopes are to develop the vacant lot to the south of us. And that's really all I had to share, so.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant? No? All right, thank you very much. Okay, we will now move on to the public hearing. This is a zoning, a map amendment and a master plan amendment. The city council is the final decision-making body for this item, but we make a recommendation to the city council. So is there anybody here who would like to speak on this item? We've got a handful. Okay. Let's start with the gentleman in the back. And please state your name for the record and please indicate if you're representing a community council.
Jordan Atkin. I am not. I'm a landowner in this area and generally support this proposal. I think a mixed use would be a good alternative to the heavier industrial uses that would be allowed under the current zoning.
Great.
That's it.
Thank you. Okay, let's see. Go over here, and then we'll go to Zach.
Hello again. Ian Kaplan, now representing myself through Ad Virtue and not Live Modal. I am an architect and I run a small real estate development practice, and I think neighborhoods like this need particular care when thinking about rezoning and particularly the future of the neighborhood. Similar to Granary District, right? We saw that as a formerly industrial area. Now it's got all this momentum to become a really thriving urban environment for those that live in there and those that will be moving to there. So when you guys are considering the rezone on this, I think that a mixed-use zoning is actually really appropriate as a transition zone between the heavy industrial areas and the kind of heavier residential areas that exist there. And unfortunately, as developers, the only tool that we really have to accomplish our placemaking, you know, which is, in my opinion, our kind of moral responsibility and the work that we do, the rezone is really the tool that we can use in these areas to try to create and spark change. And unfortunately, I know how hard the process is for the planning department to try to rezone entire neighborhoods or look at the master plans and redo all of those. So in the interim between when the city addresses the larger issue versus where we are now, I think the smaller kind of one-off parcels of the rezones are helping to start to create momentum in those neighborhoods and certainly prove concepts of what these neighborhoods could be for residents currently and in the future. So in short, I support this rezone.
Great.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Okay, Zach?
Zach Dussault in support of this proposal. We don't have a proposed development yet, so I can't complain about the parking spaces yet, but I will, as always, present my alternate transit proposal for this site. It's about a 5-minute walk from, I'm sorry, I'm new here, Route 89, which provides frequent bus service approximately every 20 minutes north and south. I just looked up Google Transit directions right now. It'd take 20 minutes for us to get from here to that site with frequencies every 20 minutes. It's also a 20-minute bike ride from this site to downtown. I also think that this area in particular would benefit from mixed-use zoning because in general what we've been seeing farther south along 4th West is kind of some gentrification resulting from the new developments there with high rents and kind of prohibitive costs. And I think that this being farther north, unfortunately because it's close to more industrial uses, could lead to some more affordable housing than farther south and still benefit from the proximity of transit and biking infrastructure. I support this project. That's it. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Is there anyone else here who'd like to speak? Okay. We'll close the public hearing, bring it back up to the commission. And David, any questions, comments, discussion, concerns, coronavirus updates, anything?
I'll make a motion.
Great.
Based on the findings and analysis in the staff report, testimony and discussion in the public hearing, I move the Planning Commission recommend to the City Council approve the proposed zoning map amendment, file PLN PCM 2019-01011 for the properties located at 771 and 795 North, 400 West. Respectively, proposed zone change from N1 light industrial district to MU mixed use zoning district and corresponding master plan amendment under file PLN PCM 2019-01095, changing the future land use map and designation from light industrial to high density mixed use. And that is one sentence.
That is impressive.
I'd just like to take note.
I will second.
A motion by Matt and a second by Brenda. Let's start with John.
Yes.
Maureen?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Brenda?
As a resident of Capitol Hill neighborhood, I would really like to see our master plan updated after 19 years of being the same old master plan. But I'll vote yes.
Carolyn?
Agree.
Andreas?
Yay.
Matt?
Yes.
Sarah?
Yes.
Great. All right, motion passes. Thank you all. Okay, we are now at item number 3, the Maplewood Addition Street Closure and Subdivision Amendment at approximately 6780 West North Temple. Case numbers PLN PCM 2019-00567 and PLN SUB 2019-00755. And we have Mayara.
All right, so this is a request to vacate the streets dedicated in the Maplewood Addition subdivision plat, which is located west of the Salt Lake International Airport. And the streets affected are located north of I-80 and are just a portion of that subdivision plat. The applicant is requesting the street closure in order to incorporate it into the adjacent parcel and prepare for future development. Staff is recommending that the Planning Commission forward a positive recommendation to City Council for the street closure and subdivision amendment that would essentially consolidate the street land into the adjacent parcel. The Maplewood Addition subdivision was created in 1911, but it was never developed. The subdivision was likely platted for residential uses, and the streets were to connect with the eastern portions of the city. However, this part of the city developed as industrial, and this plat became ineffective and actually inadequate for the area. Residential uses are not permitted in the M1 district, and the platted streets are too close together to accommodate the larger lots that industrial and heavy commercial developments typically require. The blocks within the plat have also been split up by the construction of I-80, causing a disconnection even within the streets of the subdivision. So on the screen there, you see the original plat, how it was, and then the plat today, that blank area in the middle is I-80. In the staff report, great consideration was given to the city master plans. Both the Northwest Quadrant Master Plan and the Plan Salt Lake have goals to direct development to major transportation corridors where infrastructure is existing. The Northwest Quadrant Master Plan recommends complementing access from I-80, but suggests that new streets be constructed as development occurs. Plan Salt Lake recommends prioritizing the maintenance of existing transportation infrastructure over building new, while supporting the growth of industrial areas in the city. Along the same lines, the city's transportation master plan does not propose future local streets in the city and makes no inclusion of any streets where the Maplewood Additions subdivision is located. Due to the lack of connectivity of the platted streets, its existing configuration and inability to serve current development demand, staff finds that it is unlikely that these streets will ever be constructed. Staff also finds that the public benefit of maintaining city ownership of these paper streets in its current situation is close to none because they only exist on paper and therefore do not serve a transportation or public purpose and creates an impediment for development of the adjacent parcel. Moreover, eliminating the dedicated streets could help fulfill the goals of applicable master plans, giving the development potential there. Any questions?
Questions for Mayara?
Yeah, in the staff report, it says that the applicant owns all the property surrounding the this property. Is that correct?
So that's what the image up there shows.
The image is the property that Sidla, the applicant, owns.
Yeah.
All of it. So on the plat map, though, it shows the property reserve owning that adjacent property.
The what?
Property Reserve Incorporated, i.e., the LDS Church owning property next to this. Is that been changed since this map? Do you know?
So our map shows all that land, including the lots within the subdivision, owned by Sidla. Does that answer your question? I'm not sure which property you're talking about.
I guess I'm asking for a clarification that it's actually shown on one of the maps here that Property Reserve, Inc. owns the adjacent property. Is that not true anymore?
Which page? Sorry.
Yeah,
Okay, I will check that out. Hold on a second. Oh, your maps, okay. Here a minute ago.
So are you talking about these here?
What page is that? 15, page 15.
Oh, it says suburban land reserve.
Yeah, so these.
Urban Land Reserve, well, they're pretty
The
much
other
the
one.
same company.
The other arm.
Well, they're not the same, of course, but same parent.
So these map here's are county plat maps, and they're older. Do we have the dates here?
I guess the question is, it's written in suburban land reserve, and do we know? or is
This,
that-
think we
this,
should
this
let-
map with these boundaries was not in the staff report, and that I know of, I don't think, the one you're showing up here.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't really have a sense of where suburban,
Oh,
res-
no,
of
if you
where
look,
the map is.
it looks like they own, no, but that, you're right, it conflicts with that.
Yeah, it's not clear to me where the boundaries of the whole property are, where Sidla owns. And I think this yellow, graphic representation is not a plat.
Madam Chair, I think that we can have the applicant explain that. There has been in the last few years a property transaction, I understand, so we can let the applicant
Okay.
answer that question.
Great,
If you're ready, I can clarify those.
yes,
Sure.
please make sure to state your name for the
Sure, yeah,
record.
Troy Harold. I'm with the State of Utah School and Institutional Trust Lands, SITLA. With regards to the plat map, this is obviously an older plat map that was labeled as suburban land reserve. I'm not sure if that was part of the county's records or labeled incorrectly. The entire property that you see in yellow encompasses 770 acres of the old North Temple landfill. That property has a lot of existing constraints on the property, as I'm sure the commission's probably aware. This Maplewood subdivision is just one of those. There's some existing power line right-of-ways, there's existing Brighton Canal, et cetera. As part of our work to start cleaning up and remediating that landfill, our goal is to remove some of these constraints so that we can then prepare a development plan to eventually bring back to the Planning Commission and present that to the Planning Commission as part of our remediation of the landfill. So this is really one step, but to answer Commissioner Shearer's specific question, the entire 770 acres is what is owned by SITLA, and it encompasses everything around the Maplewood subdivision, which you can see in the lower right-hand corner up on the screen there, where the old street lines are. As part of our development, we would be dedicated and putting in new streets, new utility lines, et cetera, as the development progresses.
Just to also add to the clarification on the property, the subdivision plat, the amendment shows the subject property. They're shown in two different pages because of the size of the lot. But if you look at the vicinity map, the two will show the subject property, if that makes sense. That would be where the consolidation will happen with these two properties.
The other thing to be aware of, if you're not aware of, is that the Mountain View corridor will be coming north and developing a new interchange at I-80, and that is happening between 7200 West there, which you can see in the lower half edge, and 5600 West, which is just off the screen to the right. Where that interchange is, there will be a new bubble as they do the flyovers, and that bubble actually hits right about where the subdivision is as well. So we're already and having discussions with UDOT about basically them purchasing this property for that future right-of-way corridor.
Great. Any questions for Troy? No?
Okay.
Thank you. All right, we will now move to the public hearing for this item. And again, this is an item that will be decided by the city council. We are here to get public input and make a recommendation to the city council and inform their decision. So I'll go ahead and open the public hearing. Is there any community council in this area? Probably not. They're not here? Okay. Can I see a show of hands of who would like to speak? Okay, we'll just start with you, ma'am. And please make sure to state your name for the record.
Hi, I'm Dita Seed, and I'm here representing the Stop the Polluting Port Coalition. We're very concerned about the development of this property that's owned by Sitla. We've had very little information about what they intend to do, and I think what we'd like to ask you tonight to do is to ask for a plan from them before you proceed to approve the street closure, because what happens on this property has serious implications for the health of the adjacent neighborhoods. There's been discussion of turning it into a second intermodal rail facility of quite a large size. There's also been discussion of developing it in a pattern similar to the pattern of development that exists in the International Center, but we'd really like to know which it is. And this is a point where you, as our representatives, can say to this entity, Sitla, which frankly has a poor history of transparency and accountability, what is the ultimate plan? And then make a decision about doing this, which will enable them to move forward with development. But we really want to know what they're intending to develop, and we think that our community deserves those answers first before development proceeds.
Thank you. Okay.
Hi, thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Dr. Courtney Henley, and I am here representing myself and my community, which is the Avenues community, not as a community council member or anything, but as a resident, and the Utah Physicians for a Healthy Environment. And I am asking you to not to approve this request from Sitla. The lands do lie in the area designated by the legislature for a future inland port. We've spent the past 6 weeks up at the legislature talking to people about the plans, and there is no plan other than this was a plan in 1970 was the most compelling reason I heard from a legislature representative Stenquist. And can I ask the gentleman from Sitla a question?
You can pose it to us, and then we can pose it back to
Well,
you.
I wondered, does Sitla share a common mission, a common vision of the future with the students and schools in Utah? I hope the answer is yes, in which case approving this small step towards a huge air polluting point source near so many schools and students, I think is a little bit short-sighted. I also hope once it gets to this, I've spoken with Chris Wharton, my my city council representative, about this at length. I hope that the city council is going to vote this down since we're in litigation about the plans for these lands. It doesn't seem like a good idea to be making small tweaks right now that could have implications down the road that maybe we don't anticipate.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else here who'd like to speak? Sir, come forward. Please make sure to state your name for the record.
I don't hear very well, so I'm not sure what has taken place. I'm James King, retired professor of geography at the university. Yesterday, I was driving out along North Temple, and I noticed a row of power poles out there. I thought they were very ugly, and I'm concerned about the impression people get as they come into the city. And if you're going to add a railroad yard fairly close to North Temple, is that correct? That wouldn't be very pretty to look at. We already have two bad entrances on the south end the gravel pits on either side of the city, do we have to ruin the view that people have coming in from the west? So I don't like the idea. I'm also, of course, opposed to the inland port, as you might expect. I don't think it's a good idea. With the economic downturn that we are facing, I don't think much is going to be happening out there. And I do think mainly that this needs an environmental statement, a proper statement, study, further time on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Zach?
Zach Dussault. I guess I'm in favor of this. My reasoning because of that is this is west of the airport. We're not going to use these public streets as a city. I mean, I didn't even know about all these inland port issues associated with this application before it came before you guys. But I'm assuming this isn't the hill to die on for the opposition of the inland port. And frankly, if it was my land and there were streets from what I think the early 1900s, late 1800s, and I couldn't develop because it was denied for political reasons, I don't think I would appreciate that. And I guess those are my comments. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak? Okay, I'll close the public hearing. I'll ask Troy to come back. And there are a couple questions.
Sure.
That were raised. One is the plan of development for the area and when and where you are in the process of developing that.
Right now, Mr. Chair, or Madam Chairman, our focus is on the remediation of the landfill. For those that aren't aware, the 770 acres was a landfill that Salt Lake City, as they leased the property, and operated a landfill in that area from the 1950s up through 1979. It was an unregulated landfill and is actually an environmental hazard. And so SITLA is working with DEQ. We've completed our site characterization and we are in the process of developing a remediation plan. The landfill has a lot, it was basically dug in trenches, and then, so they went out there and they dug a trench until they hit groundwater, threw the garbage in, and covered it back up, and moved to the next trench. I don't have a presentation that I brought with me, but at some point in the future, I could certainly go through the history of the landfill, et cetera. Now is probably not the appropriate time, giving this request. But it obviously, different water years, when the groundwater was higher, they buried the garbage at a lower level, and when the groundwater was lower, they went deeper. And so they have garbage sitting in groundwater out there now, and we have leachate concerns. We have, and it's a cleanup remediation issue, working with DEQ. We're on the voluntary cleanup program with DEQ to work through that. It'll have to be done in phases, and it'll take years to do that. Once we kind of have a better idea of exactly how that's going to look, then our next step, and once we have some of these issues cleared off of the property, we would be bringing back to this commission and to the city a master plan for the area and subdivision approvals, and all that would go through I assume your standard city processes for public hearings and allow for public comments, as Ms. Seed and others have commented on, and that would be the appropriate time to comment on our development plans. Right now, honestly, we don't have those, and the reason being, as I mentioned, is because this characterization and the cleanup could change those plans based on what we find and what we have to do. So we're working through that process. We don't have a plan as of yet. With regards to the power poles, the gentleman mentioned the power poles. That's actually a Rocky Mountain Power project in order to bring power out to the prison site, and so that's the new. We did issue an easement on the lower portion of our property to be able for Rocky Mountain Power to be able to do that, but that's for the present project.
Could you draw the line for me from the very much appreciated and necessary landfill remediation to abandoning these streets? Because I don't see any connection at all.
Part of the, well, like I said, part of the issue is we need to clear the encumbrances off the property. This is
That
one
doesn't
of,
have anything to do with the landfill. You can remediate the landfill without clearing the
well,
encumbrances.
there is some existing garbage and waste within the city streets. And without ownership of that, that would fall to the city to clean that.
And then the other comment or question from the member of the public, does Sitla share a common vision of the future with the students of Utah?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand that question or hear it.
Does Sitla share a common vision of the future with the students of Utah?
I would say we share a common vision of with the city for this property. We were involved with all the original master planning of the Northwest Quadrant before the Inland Port Bill even came up. And we attended all those public hearings as stakeholders, along with the other main property owners, and worked with the consultants that the city had at the time to develop a vision for this quadrant. And any conceptual planning we have done to date was in line with that vision, and we are still working towards that vision. As far as with the students of Utah, that's an obvious yes. My entire job is to support the students of Utah. Sitla works very hard to do that, but our requirement is to manage the 3.3 million acres we have across the state as a fiduciary responsibility for the students to provide income for the schools and to help the schools. This project is one of those projects. We have projects all across the state. If you're asking if we do go about environmentally contaminating our sites, we don't. One of the other big projects I'm working on is numerous green energy projects. We have some of the largest green energy projects in the state, solar, wind, geothermal, are all on Sitla lands. Again, this probably isn't the proper format to go into all that, but if the commission's interested, I'd be happy to come back to the presentation at a work session in the future and educate you more on Sitla. So,
Madam Chair, that's not a land use issue, so we can move on.
Oh, understood. I was just responding to the comment from the public. That's all. Okay. Any other questions for Troy? Okay.
thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Should we bring David back? Do we have questions for him or staff?
My only question for staff, and maybe you can help clarify, when the state owns the land, and Sitla may be a little bit different, but when the state owns land or UDOT owns the land, that not all of our zoning, it does or does not apply? How does that whole thing work when it's actually owned by the state?
It generally does not apply except in very limited types of situations. For example, some schools have to comply with certain zoning rules and things like that. Other institutions, the University of Utah doesn't have to comply with any of our local regulations. So
And then how does that apply then to like a subdivision plat? Or does it?
they are exempt from all of the requirements that are in Title 10-9A of State Code, which includes subdivisions. So they can do subdivisions as they want. Now, whether or not Sitla has that authority is a different
question.
I believe that they have to follow.
But if the state acquired or UDOT or someone, it just is going to do its thing.
So you're saying Sitla does not have to come? The gentleman representing Sitla just said he would come before the planning commission.
Sitla does have to
Sitla does
comply.
have to. They are not exempt from local regulations.
Thank you.
I
under
just
current
want to
law.
clarify that then if they were just going through subdivision, that wouldn't necessarily kick them to coming to a hearing, though.
Right. If they have a development plan that requires planning commission approval, then they would come before us. But otherwise, they would not, just like any other property owner.
Question.
Okay. Any other questions or comments, discussion? Is anyone willing to entertain a motion?
Is there any reason why we would not forward to the council a recommendation that they approve this only after receiving a plan from Sitla?
That is, you can make any recommendation to the city council that you feel is appropriate. They don't have to listen to that, but that's their prerogative. I mean, they're the decision makers, and your job is to make a recommendation. So if you feel that if the commission feels that's appropriate, then that's the recommendation you should make.
My opinion would be that our job is planning, and so from my perspective, taking these paper streets off is okay. If the city council, who does represent these people in a way that we do not, they are the elected officials, if they want to hold it, that's really on them, but I don't think that's something we should mess with.
I have some concerns, given that there's contamination potentially under the public streets, and the longer the city retains ownership of those, the longer they remain liable. That's my thought.
I certainly hear and understand the concerns surrounding the inland port, and the advocates are speaking and defending that. I just don't think this is also the hill that I would fight for in that battle. I probably would not support that.
I'll make the motion.
Thank you.
Based on the findings and analysis in the staff report, the policy considerations for street closure, and the input received, I move the Planning Commission forward a positive recommendation to the City Council for the street closure and subdivision amendment proposed in PLN PCM 2019-00567 and PLN SUB 2019-00755 with the condition listed in the staff report.
A motion by Maureen,
Second.
second by John. Let's start with John.
Yes.
Maureen,
Yes.
Amy,
Yes.
Brenda,
No.
Carolyn,
Agree.
Andreas,
Yay.
Matt,
Yes.
Sarah.
Yes.
Okay, 7-4, 1 against, motion passes. Thank you all for coming and participating. And again, City Council has the final approval of that item, so there will be another public hearing before the City Council. Okay, item number 4, design review, Gilmore Hall Building addition at Westminster College at approximately 1230 East, 1700 South. Case number PLN PCM 2020-00009.
Okay, as you noted, this was a design review application for a building addition to an existing building at Westminster College. The proposed addition is called Gilmore Hall. It's on the interior of campus. The address of Westminster College is 1840 South, 1300 East. This will be located approximately 1230 East, 1700 South. It's a little bit south of 1700 South, and again, I mentioned it was on the interior of campus. The building's is 45 feet tall, about 27,000 square feet total size, 9,000 square foot footprint. Buildings over 35 feet in the institutional zoning district are allowed through the design review process, which is why the application is before you today. Here's a rendering of the addition to the building. It faces southeast into the campus, and the map orients you a little bit. It's a triangular piece of property that was formerly a amphitheater beside the Jewett Center for Performing Arts, and that's the proposed location from the building. The nearest corner is about 200 feet away from 1700 South. Again, campus context photos of where the location is. The commissioners who were on the field trip got to see that as well. We looked at a number of things, the neighborhood compatibility, again, that location on the interior of campus where there are structures around it, buildings around it that are significantly taller. The design of it does fit some of the architecture, and the applicant can talk to that more on the design of it and how those visual cues were taken from other buildings on campus. Again, master plan compliance, it does comply with the master plan, and it meets the design review standards for additional height, which includes design elements aimed at the human scale and making it fit its surroundings. So staff is recommending that the Planning Commission approve the design review application.
David, can you, it might have been in the report and I can't remember, how tall is the current building?
For the adjacent building?
Yeah, that they're going to be adding on to.
I believe it's probably about 35 feet. I'll let the applicant
Is that
answer that when they come
yeah,
up.
I want to know because we're on a hill, so is that including the lower level as you go?
I'll let the applicant answer
Okay.
that.
Is the applicant here?
Yes.
Any other questions for David before we bring up the applicant? No? Okay. Great. So the applicant can come forward.
This gentleman come forward.
Hi, my name is Lance Newman. I'm the Dean of the School of Arts and Sciences at Westminster College. And I just want to speak a little bit to the why of this project. And then Derek Payne from VCBO Architects will talk about the building itself. One of our growth areas at Westminster College right now, and for the last 5 to 7 years, has been in the performing arts. And this building is going to allow us to fulfill plans to grow over a period of about 10 to 15 years the performing arts from a music minor and a theater minor to full-blown majors in music, theater, and dance. With about, we expect at full build-out, 180 students, 60 in each one of those programs, which will amount to about 10 to 15% of our undergraduate student body. So this new building adds a small to medium-sized recital hall with about 100 seats. It adds a dance floor, 2 dance studios, which can then be combined into a dance performance space, as well as practice rooms for our music students and a theater rehearsal space. All of these are instructional facilities that will allow us to really just deliver on our fundamental mission, which is undergraduate liberal arts education. So the building is fully funded by external donations. The lead gift came from the Gilmore Foundation, the Florence J. Gilmore Foundation. She was a music major at Westminster College who graduated in 1936 and left a foundation that has as one of its primary directives supporting the music at Westminster College. So that's where our lead gift has come from, but there's funding from many different friends of the college and the community. In addition to helping us serve our fundamental mission, I think that this will also help us serve a role we hope to play, which is as a hub for the performing arts in Sugar House. I was counting, and we have 46 live performing arts events in our existing facility already this year, and this will expand that capacity and create opportunities for residents of this fast-growing neighborhood to come see plays, see opera productions, see our community choir sing in our community choir, and so forth. So we're hoping that this will really add to our already existing integration into the neighborhood. So thank you for the opportunity to speak to you.
Thank you.
So my name is Derek Payne. Thanks for the opportunity to present this project. We're excited about it, and anybody who spent time on the Westminster campus, I think, understands it's unique among higher education institutions west of the Mississippi. It's a very intimate scale. The buildings are closely spaced. There's really nothing like it. So this building is not out of character with what's been developed on that campus to date. And when Lance needed the types of spaces that he just outlined for you, there really was that triangle left as an addition to the arts complex. It wasn't functioning well as open space. It was too steep for an amphitheater. And so we were able to get, as Lance said, a performance dance studio, a recital hall, a large lobby, many practice rooms on the lower level of that. So it's fulfilling a lot of needs that the theater, dance, and arts needs on the campus. Let me just go back to the first picture that he showed. The basic concept of the building is the recital hall is actually on the second level. And so we wanted it to be almost like a precious music box held on sort of a base of a building. And the masonry character and the horizontal banding of the building locks into some of the other buildings on campus. It's in addition to a very modern building on their campus, but it's also in close proximity to Converse Hall, which is on the historic register, and Payne Gymnasium, which is actually just south of it. But that basic idea of creating that music box, it also, we wanted it to be almost like an instrument. So the east face of that wall actually is articulated because it's based on the acoustics inside the hall. And so it's almost like an instrument reading from the outside and the inside. So as the wall articulates to spread the acoustic waves where you want them, it also reflects that on the outside. I think one of the primary objectives was not only does it need to be functional, but also we really wanted to activate the plaza to the east of this building. So every space, even the recital hall, has pretty significant glass and transparency out to that that new plaza. And in fact, the new entry, I'm not going to get the mouse, but the new entry into the facility is actually the glazing on the right. And so that was a primary objective, really, to activate that plaza. And I think, just briefly, what we're asking for the additional 10 feet in height is because the recital hall it takes a lot of volume and height to create a functional and an effective recital hall. And so that's essentially where that 10 feet of additional space that we're requesting comes from or goes into.
Derek, I live right by Westminster College, right? I live on the dorm side. I walk around there all the time. I actually never knew there was an amphitheater there. It's so well hidden. It is a hole, and I never knew it was there. So I personally feel like because we're on a hill, 45 feet is really appropriate. It won't seem higher because you're going down, and it's enough down that it won't impede anything. But I'm just wondering, the current building, it feels like, if you're on that little road where that parking lot is, it is like a one-story, but the building goes down further, and it's connected then to the parking behind it on the west. Is this going to be? Is this going to end up being one building then that also functions as one building? So you can come in from the parking lot if you're driving there, and I walk over, but and walk and get and access that.
Yes, all the buildings will be interconnected when this is finished. In fact, there will be a ticket office that's accessible right inside these doors that you can get
on the east side.
On the east side, that you can get a ticket for either the Courage Theater or the larger.
So how much taller is this? If I was standing in that little parking lot on the east side, how much taller is this than the current building?
It's one level higher, essentially.
It's just one level higher.
Yeah.
Have you thought about taking the existing building and also adding another level onto that? Not in place of this, but in addition to it.
Yeah, no, we've looked at that, and over the years they've added on to it. The structure was not built for that, and it would be quite expensive to make it be built for that. We have added solar panels onto the roof of the existing Jewett Center, but
now you're going to block them.
They're going to be moved. They're the old kind that aren't actually down with ballast, so they can be moved. And I would say that, to David's point, being on the interior of campus, it does sort of step up from 17th South. It's 2 stories, and it's pretty tall on 17th South.
Yeah, it is tall. It's deceptive because there's a lot of room in there. But if you're on the east side, you really don't get that feeling.
Yeah, but then if you step up 1 story here and then you step up with Converse Hall.
Yeah, Converse Hall will actually feel taller than this because it's up higher.
Yep, so there's kind of a rhythm to the campus. It's building as it moves into the center of campus. It's getting taller. And
I just wanted to try to visualize it, so thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant?
Talk about parking. This will add parking, necessary parking, and how are we doing that?
So we're required to do a parking count, and so they do an overall count for the entire campus, and there's a shared parking count that occurs. And so based on time of day, you know, there's theater performances happen at night, and so that weight's higher than students during the day. They're still under the total parking spaces required for the entire campus. And I don't remember the exact number, Brenda, but I think we're about 80 stalls over the requirement for that the city has.
Oh, you have a, there's a chart here. There's a schedule. Thank you. I see it now.
Any other questions?
Yeah,
John?
I just have a question about the kind of overall design concept. I think everything else checks my boxes. I like more height. I think it is a good scaling of starting off smaller and going to bigger. But my question is the curved roof, is that a functional element, or is that?
I wouldn't say it's a functional element, but I guess it's a borrowed piece of architecture from the arches in Converse Hall and several other historic buildings. So it was an attempt to take an element that's used in other parts of the campus and sort of maybe help magnify this piece of architecture. I think they do want it to be iconic at the same time as fitting into a fabric of architecture that it's really beautiful. I'm sure you've been there, John. But
Yeah, no, and I mean, I like the form following the function, the idea of the faceted facade kind of mimicking, like pushing the sound back and those types of elements. It's just, there's parts of it that feel like it's a little bit floating, and I wonder if that curve is kind of adding to that feeling. And I just was curious as if it was a functional element versus just an aesthetic that's tying back to the context of the site. But
it is, the hall is getting taller in volume as it proceeds back. We've tried it many different ways. We stepped it, we put a straight line on it. It seemed a little bit severe when we had a straight line coming up, and although that matches some of the pediments on the campus, you know, the president preferred sort of a curve.
yeah, I'm just trying to think through the human scale of it. That's all. So, but
Well,
yeah.
I think we tried hard with the glazing and the transparency to really pull people into the new facility and activate it that way. In fact, I mean, if we can get good bid numbers, the opening that you see in the plaza that into the dance studio, it's going to be a nano wall that you can just pull the whole wall aside, and then you can do performances in the dance studio that then there's a space out in the plaza that you can sit and do outdoor performances, and which will work great for the some of the programs that they're thinking about using or implementing.
No, I actually that would help tie it back to the ground with the faceted upper facade, but having a lower facade that can mimic that by opening, that solves that problem for me. So
Yeah, well, we wanted it to be different. Like I said, it's like a music box on top. So we did want to separate it visually with
Yeah.
still creating that strong masonry base that Westminster is known for.
that's all for me.
Any other questions?
So, yeah, I have one more question, sorry. So we don't have a site plan per se here indicating even the plaza, I don't think, that you've got here, showing in that image, right? And we don't have a site plan that shows whatever changes you might make to that existing street, which are going to happen because you're tearing things up, right? So can you describe that or tell me why we don't have a site plan?
So the plaza extension, again, is a function of phasing, and that's planned to be in a future phase. But the intention is, I think I don't know if I'm giving anything away, Lance or Sheila, but the desire of the college really is to remove all of that parking throughout the entire middle of the campus, because it's a very strong pedestrian plaza. And so with each project that they've sort of gone out and marched out towards 17th South, they have done a plaza upgrade. And that's the intention here. It's just a matter of phasing that, doing the building first.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? No? Okay. All right. Thank you for your presentation. We will now move to the public hearing. I'll open the public hearing. Is there anyone here who'd like to speak? Zach?
Zach Dussault, speaking in favor of the project. This is only a 10-foot variance, and it's interior of the block. I don't think it's going to be a very imposing structure. I like the design of the structure, and I was in favor of it before that, but then he said removing parking, so now I'm really in favor of it and adding pedestrian infrastructure. Yep, that's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, now I'll close the public hearing. Bring it back to the commission. Any discussion, questions, comments, or is anyone ready to make a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Oh, look at that.
Come on, Brenda, this is my neighborhood.
Hey, go right ahead.
Thank you. I'm just kidding. Motion to approve with conditions listed in the staff report. Based on the findings and analysis in the staff report, testimony, and discussion at the public hearing, I move that the Planning Commission approve the proposed design review application for additional building height, file PLN PCM 2020-00009 for the Gilmore Hall Building Addition at Westminster College, located at approximately 1230 East, 1700 South, subject to the conditions listed in the staff report.
I'll second.
Okay, I've got a motion by Amy, a second by Brenda. Let's start with Matt.
Yes.
Andres.
Yay.
Carolyn.
Agree.
Brenda.
Yes.
Amy.
Yes.
Maureen.
Yes.
John.
Yes.
Great. All right, motion passes. Thank you all very much. And with that, we are now adjourned. So thank you all for coming.